Welcome back. I am so excited today to have another amazing guest on the It Starts With You podcast. Today we have Corene Phelps. Corene, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited. First of all, I am just personally excited to hear more about your amazing knowledge and experience in a space that I honestly didn't know a ton about before I met you, and also for all the listeners to get your knowledge. So I want to introduce Corene. So also goes by Corey. I might call her Corey as well. She is a native Washingtonian who left a successful career in luxury real estate for entrepreneurship, investing, and personal development. She became obsessed with combining the power of peak performance, which we know is one of my favorite words, intuition, and purpose to harness untapped potential. The last 10 years have been a journey into spirituality, business, wealth creation, and doing what it takes to create extraordinary impact. Her mission as a hypnobreathwork therapist is to help others tap into the power of a regulated nervous system and the subconscious to unlock new levels of wealth, success, and freedom. If that doesn't get you excited to listen to this conversation, I don't know what will. So, Corey, thank you so much. If you could just share, obviously, your bio gives us so much amazing context about what you do, but just share a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think down to my core, I am really a seeker. I'm super curious, a lifelong learner, and a little bit of a detective, actually, because I'm like always trying to I'm like, is that really true kind of situation, and digging just a little bit deeper. I like to learn trial by error, which sometimes gets me into a little bit of trouble, but that's really, I think, been the how I ended up where I am today doing what I do, was based on my own journey and needing to access a way to show up and perform at a higher level but experience less stress.
Less stress, when we all love to experience less stress. So I find your story so relatable to a lot of myself and to a lot of people that I work with when it comes to this point where you either get overwhelmed, you get burnt out, and it's like, now what? So can you just share a little bit more about what led you down this path? I mean, even just like hypno breathwork, I hadn't even heard those words before. What led you to this?
Well, so I'm somebody who works a lot. That's I find, I guess, a little bit of my self-worth in working and showing up. And so I spent a good chunk of my life working 7 days a week, long hours, and kind of wearing that badge of busy and kind of hiding behind it, I would say. And in that journey, I was using different modalities to support my clients, always kind of thinking that I was doing it for my clients, but I was really doing it for myself. And so I'll preface all of that with, inside of doing this, I experienced burnout multiple times, until finally, on the third time, which is like, how many times do you have to learn a lesson? I found myself sitting in a hospital, or walking into a hospital, because I thought that I was having a heart attack. So I walked into an emergency room. And at the tender age of 38, this is what I'm thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. And the doctor comes in and said, no, I don't, you're not having a heart attack. You are having a panic attack. And I think it's because you're really overworked, overstressed. I think you're super burnout, and that your adrenals are completely shot. And this was my moment. This was my moment of like, okay, this is the last time I'm going to have to learn this lesson. And what can I do to finally learn the lesson, to finally find a way to show up, be able to do more, because I want to do more, but to not necessarily always be burning the candle at both ends. So finding a new way to approach hard work and stress and all of the things, and be able to still perform at the level that was really important to me. And this was really when I found hypnobreathwork, or found breathwork, and then started combining the power of hypnosis and breathwork with that as a way to access new levels of potential and be able to think faster and do more with ease and flow.
Oh my goodness. And I think it's so interesting, because when you say like how many times, I feel like a lot of the people that I either work with, or just when I'm talking to people, like they almost experience burnout just like over and over and over again. And I know for myself and other people I've talked to, like they try things like, okay, I'm going to try taking walks. I'm going to try journaling. I'm going to try doing, some deep breathing. But it all to me feels like surface level. And I think that's what really came up for me when I met you and I've talked to you and I had a session with you and I can't wait to talk about that because it was really eye-opening. But what you do gets like a deeper level versus because it sounds like you had been trying things before. What had you been trying that you feel like maybe was almost like a band-aid, like was kind of helping but didn't really help you get through it?
So I think I was doing all of the things that we are supposed to do, and that was like air quotes, supposed to do, right? All from exercise, that's like a core to who I am, so moving my body, but I was of course doing that to the maximum level. So I was actually causing distress in my body because I was taking it to like an obsessive level. And I was meditating. But again, I think I was kind of just checking the box of meditating. Mm-hmm. And sometimes meditating really isn't the place to start when we're completely dysregulated. So I think I was causing some of more stress for myself, even though I thought I was doing the right things. I was doing all of the gratitude, which is something that I teach my clients to do, but there's some steps that get to happen before that, before it really can have the impact that it is capable of having. So again, it was like gratitude on a surface level. I wasn't feeling it. I had these like blocks, and it all comes back to being completely dysregulated in my nervous system. So I was doing all of the things, meditation, journaling, going for walks. But there was this deeper piece of seeing where some of these patterns and habits were actually originating from, because if we don't address those, we'll keep just repeating them.
So for somebody that, and I just think of so many people when I'm working with these executives, I'm working with these entrepreneurs, these high level leaders who are doing these things. They're like, okay, I'm doing the gratitude and I'm taking the walks and I'm still feeling this. For somebody who knows nothing about nervous system regulation, how would you explain what it is to have a dysregulated nervous system?
Well, it's kind of just being stuck in a state of stress. And when we get stuck in a state of stress, that starts to become our baseline and our normal. So we don't even realize that that's where we are. And your nervous system, think of it kind of like having bodyguards that walk with you. And so these bodyguards in your nervous system kind of can walk hand in hand with you, next to you, or they can stand in front of you and block you, which would be that place where you're doing all of the things, but they're just not landing because there's this bodyguard standing in front of you, blocking you from having this experience of connection within yourself, to release the stress, to be able to move into stress states, because we do want to be able to experience stress. That's not that stress is bad, it's our perception and staying stuck there. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. It's like the example I've given to people before of, stress can be good as an indicator to us. So when you hold your hand over like a hot burner, it's an indicator to you like to move your hand. The problem is if you were to keep holding your hand over the hot burner, you're going to get burned. And I think that's people are so used to staying in that high stress state. They don't even know what it would feel like or look like to not be in that high stress state. Okay, so you help people regulate their nervous system. Tell us more like what is hypnobreath? So I think people have heard of breath work, maybe not. What is hypnobreathwork?
Well, hypnobreathwork is a very effective and efficient modality. It takes three things and puts it all together. So for all of my high achievers and high performers out there, we love to do things in efficient manner. So this is an efficient way to experience things that you're like this breath work, or if you're thinking of trying meditation or something like that, it gets to happen in an efficient manner because it combines a bunch of things together. And what it combines together is breath work, which I'll break down in a second because it's kind of an umbrella term. It uses hypnosis, so I'm sure you've heard of hypnosis, and we can talk about all of the sort of myths and things around hypnosis and why it's not scary. And then it combines visioning, and visioning is, again, nothing new, right? This is something that high achievers, CEOs, founders, professional athletes have been using for success for years and years and years, because when we visualize something, it actually allows us to practice it in our mind. And when we practice it in our mind, it doesn't know the difference between actually happening and, again, this practice mode. So when you actually go to do it and execute it in real time, it doesn't feel like you're doing it for the first time. It creates new neural pathways in your brain, which operates on the concept of neuroplasticity, which means that we get to change how we think, how we feel, all of those sorts of things. So that's what happens inside of experience. So breath work, really, we'll kind of like back it up and go there. Mm-hmm. Breath work, there's lots of different ways to experience breath work, right? It happens in yoga. There's different box breathing, Wim Hof, conscious connected breathing, there's rebirthing, there's holotropic, there's all sorts of different ways to apply breath work. And really what that means is that it's a different cadence. There might be holds or no holds, different lengths of inhaling in and out. So the particular type that I facilitate most often is hypnobreathwork. We use a conscious and connected breath pattern, which is a 3-part breath, which means if you've heard of Andrew Huberman, which I'm going to guess there's a lot of listeners out there that have heard of him because you're a high achiever, high performer. He's a neuroscientist, and he's done a lot of studies that came back saying that the physiological sigh is the best way to manage stress and regulate your nervous system. And the conscious connected 3-part breath is essentially the physiological sigh. So you breathe in for 2 breaths. So you fill your belly all the way up. And then you take another breath in, fill your chest all the way up. So now you're like so full, you couldn't even take any more in. And then you exhale out. It basically falls out. And you continue this breath pattern throughout the duration of a session. So we're flooding the body with oxygen. And when we do that, it starts to change the oxygen, carbon dioxide levels in your blood, which starts to hit pause on your prefrontal cortex, which is the place where we like to get stuck in that inner critic or critical thinker situation where it's hard to see new ways of thinking to solve problems. It's like we have blinders on, and it's like there's only one way to approach a problem. And so we hit pause on that part of your brain, and we open up the doors to your subconscious, which is where change gets to happen. And that's where the hypnosis comes in. And hypnosis really is meditation with a very specific goal in mind. And it just uses the power of suggestion, which is what we're doing with your subconscious mind. We're suggesting a new thought that you want to adopt, because we've talked about it, right? And these are these things that we want to change. So we're just offering a little bit of suggestion, and your subconscious is in a place where it's really ready to and willing to accept it here, which then makes that change very easy. And that's when we move into that visioning piece.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. That was such a great. And that even helped me out. Like, I know I've asked you this before when I had a session. I was like, okay, explain this to me. And the way that you just broke this down was amazing. So I want to dive into a few of the pieces because, first of all, I love neuroscience. And I always tell people, like, I can just geek out on this because I think it's amazing that we can actually change our brain. So I do mental fitness with clients where we don't get into the breath work piece, although this is so fascinating. But the idea of learning that you can change your neural connections and make new neural connections, and like how we didn't know this before we dove into this world, I think it is crazy. And so many people don't know this. I'm curious, what do you say to people? Because when I introduce this to some people who have never been into this space, they feel like it feels a little like woo-woo out there. What do you want to say to everybody listening? What do you say to the people who are these high achievers, these high performers who are very just like strategy focused, and they kind of brush off something like this?
Yeah, well, I dive into the neuroscience part, which if we really start breaking it down, all the stuff that you hear that is like spiritual, or we want to call it woo-woo, it's science. So I can explain the science behind all of that, even down to like, okay, you want to talk about manifestation, we can talk about the science about it because there's science connected to it. And so if you're open to having a conversation and kind of interested, which usually if someone like kind of blows it off and is like, I'll never try that, there's actually a little bit of curiosity underneath of that. And so I will usually open up the door for like, why do you think that? And to be honest, I mean, if you really think about it, your brain operates like a high powered computer. We were just actually, before we hit record, talking about AI. Your brain essentially is like AI in your head, right? And it is always absorbing all of this information, and it keeps a record of absolutely everything that you've ever thought, felt, and experienced. And if there was a way for you to go in and access all of that without having to do, I don't know, like you could do it really, really quickly, wouldn't you want to be open to doing that and doing it without any basically chemical intervention? What we're doing with breath work, we're really releasing your own body's internal pharmacy, which is neurotransmitters. They get released in this sort of, I call it a cocktail party in your brain. So you get to create a cocktail party in your brain and access flow state, which is high achievers and high performers, is something that we really, really want to dive into and be able to access. And breath work essentially allows you to hack it. When we talk about biohacking or little tricks to be able to make things happen faster for us, breath work really is an opportunity for you to do that. It's a tool and a resource to empowers you to drop into flow on demand, essentially.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, getting in the flow state and even explaining it from that perspective. I think if people can understand it, and that's why I always think it's important, either in my coaching or even when I'm doing talks and things, I explain to people, I want you to understand the science just a little bit, like not so in depth, but because when we understand it and we understand what's going on, we're more willing to adopt and try and give it a chance because we can understand it. And so the way you're explaining that, where it's like, okay, you might think this, but it's based in science and we can't argue with science so much. And so once we understand it, more willing to try that. And I remember from our session, so I had the privilege of doing a session with Corey, and what I loved is that before we had the breathwork session is you had me have some conversation first around like, what is my intention, or what's something that, is blocking me right now, and then brought that in through the session. So can you just explain a little bit of like what it looks like when somebody has a session with you?
Oh, yeah. So we usually take a little bit of time at the beginning to talk about the science and what you're going to feel, what to expect, so that it doesn't throw you off in the midst of the experience. And then we talk about the goals that you have, an intention, maybe someplace you feel stuck. So the way that I use this really is, it's a coaching tool. So I bring it in as to help you access your own answers, which we all know we have that wisdom inside of us. And a great, amazing coach isn't going to tell you what to do or give you the answers. They are going to help you find the answers within yourself. And I think this is why I love it so much, is because it helps you find the answers so quickly. So this pre-conversation is really important. So you will tell me what's on your mind, maybe something you've been struggling with, and we'll talk about an intention. I'm able to, both from using your words and your language, because your subconscious mind really likes your own words, not the words that I would pick for a certain situation. And I use those and lace them in the session. Sometimes also, maybe you have an intention or you think your block is one thing, but I'm able to see that it's completely something else. So we'll do a little bit of blend of what your intention is and what you want. And then I might ask you some thought-provoking questions inside of the session based on what I saw, which is what coaches do, right? So it's kind of an experiential coaching session is really what a hypnobreathwork session is, especially in a one-to-one context. And then you dive in and we do all of the breath work. And on the other side, you come out and tell me what you saw, what you felt, all of the things. We have this period of integration, and then we create a strategy for execution, right? Because one of the big questions inside of a session is, what is your next action step? What is your next intuitive action step? What came through for you? And so we'll talk about all those things, and then it's for you to actually go take the action. And that's where the real magic happens, because when we stack these actions on top of each other over and over again, we create an accelerated a path towards success in whatever it is that you're reaching for.
Yeah, and having that, I love at the end of our session where you were like, okay, so now what are you going to do with this? And I remember you asked like, okay, how did that feel? It's like, I think one of the words I used was like, just like peace. And for somebody like me who my brain is always going and I'm always thinking, and it can be really hard for me to really relax. I remember just feeling like so much insight came up, but I just felt so relaxed and so peaceful, but also re-energized. And so I love how you talk about people use this, and if they continue to have sessions, they continue to do this, like you are collapsing time, which most high performers want to do. Like, how can I accelerate my results? And why would we not use all of the tools and resources available to us?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
One of the other things, Corey, so Corey is one of my clients who I have worked with to help her get this amazing message and gift out there to organizations, to conferences, and be doing speaking sessions and workshops on this, because this is something that more people need to know about. So tell us a little bit about why you think it is so important that you bring this to groups of people, to companies, to conferences.
Oh, because I truly believe that if everyone had the knowledge to how to regulate their own nervous system, that it would completely change how corporations work. It would change home life. It would change a lot, right? So stress would be something that, instead of being a hindrance, would be able to harness the power of it. It would change culture in corporations. It would help leaders lead better, because they'd have an element of, I think, empathy for the people that are on their teams, their staff, and as like staff or workers, I don't know what the right term is for that, but for the people, employees in corporate, having the ability to advocate for themselves, take ownership, and really start to have an element of, I don't know, a little bit more of care for showing up, because they feel like their company, their leaders, their managers actually care for them in a different kind of way, I think would really change just how everyone lives their life. I think that corporate has kind of a bad rap in terms, I mean, there's the whole idea of like quiet quitting and all of that going on right now, and people are, or the great resignation, right? Because of companies maybe not caring. I think having this inside of corporate opens up the door for people to feel more cared for, to be able to want to show up for work and do a really great job, which I think will also just change the economy too. I mean, you think about, if companies have more care and employees have more care when they show up, and leaders have more care, then these corporations are going to thrive. Inside of that, it's going to change the economy. It's also going to completely shift home life too. Imagine if you aren't coming home and completely stressed when you interact with your partner and your kids. So I think overall, it's something that can benefit everyone.
Yeah, and that's like when we first started talking about this, and why this was so important for you to get that out there, and why to get this message out there. Having worked in organizations and working with people in organizations, I see so much power and potential in bringing something like this, because it is different than what people are traditionally doing, and yet we are seeing the burnout. We're seeing, like you said, people leaving. We're seeing issues with retention and engagement. We're seeing issues with people just feeling like fulfillment. And a lot of the things that I hear from people is they are bringing it home. And so it's impacting their family, and it's impacting their personal life, and it's impacting the people they work with. And so many people walk around very unaware, very not, like unconscious of how they feel, of what's really going on for them. And this is just this tool that they could be using to help them. So I'm curious, for people who have never done anything like this, or are listening in and they're going like, okay, what's my first step? Like, what's one of the first things that I could do to just help me to either regulate my nervous system on my own, or kind of start to like tiptoe into this space?
Well, I think the first thing, if you're like, oh, am I dysregulated right now, or is this something I'm experiencing? I would just say stop for a second, do a scan through your body, and kind of check in. Because a lot of our problems happen to be that our head isn't where our heart is, and neither one are where our feet are, which true nervous system regulation really is just bringing all of that into a level of like being in the present moment. Because when we're in the present, like actually there, you can't really be terribly stressed, because you're not thinking about the future, having anxiety about it, or experiencing fear based on something that might have happened in the past. You're just there and in the moment. And so I would start with a body scan, noticing maybe how you're feeling, and then from there to try and just like really stand up tall, stack your shoulders over your hips. A lot of time we're all hunched over. I just was doing it right there.
And so you just made me like, okay, let me sit up more.
Yeah, I noticed as I said it, I was like, oh, I'm kind of doing the little legs, right? And that puts us into a state of stress. So like, just get yourself nice and open, right? When we start to open up the space that we're occupying, it actually starts to regulate our nervous system in that, right? Because you start to open everything up, which just feels better. And then I would take a couple deep breaths, like really expansive deep breaths into your belly, make them nice, slow exhales, and then do that body scan again. And you're going to just start to notice how much different and how much better you feel. And that's just a quick little, like, not complicated way to do a little check-in and regulate your nervous system. And if you notice that you're feeling a little better after that, then imagine what you might feel like if you went through a whole entire hypnobreathwork session, or a whole entire breathwork session.
Thank you so much for sharing that tip, because I think what sounds maybe simple or like basic for you or for us is so many people don't do that during the day, right? They like grab their coffee in the morning, maybe they eat or maybe they don't eat, they run out the door, they're going from meeting to meeting, they barely have time to go to the bathroom during the day. They're just in this constant stressed state. And if they can even just take a few moments to just do what you did, like just do a check-in, like, okay, oh my gosh, my shoulders have been my ears all day long, like roll my shoulders back, take up space. So for those of you listening, if this is like the main thing that you can walk away with is like just start being more aware of how are you going throughout your day and are you in this constant fight or flight stressed state? So Corey, I probably asked you this when we first started in one of our first sessions, but I want to ask you, I'd love to ask my guests this, like if you could shake people and tell them one thing, what would be that thing that you tell them?
Goodness, what would that one thing be? I feel like I'd be like, sit down, because I don't know if I could just pick one thing. But I think, especially because what we're talking about today is to really acknowledge the power of your breath and what it can do for you, and not just for you, for others, because our nervous systems actually impact those around us. So if you take radical responsibility for you and really using your breath to take radical responsibility, you're actually going to make a tremendous ripple effect in the world.
Mic drop, right? I love that. And I talk about that with people a lot, is this ripple effect that you have in a leadership role as a leader, that you have a ripple effect into other people. And just as humans, as people, like the energy we put out there. And if, like you said before, the impact that could really have on the world is if we all can take more ownership of where we're at and our own state, so that we don't, share with, like I always say, almost like explode all over everybody else, like your emotions and everything else that you're now sending out to other people. And I was just having this conversation with my son. I have a 6-year-old, and I was just telling him about, he woke up one morning and he just kind of, we all wake up kind of cranky, but it was just like you felt it right away. And all of a sudden then like me and my husband felt it. And I had a conversation with him of just like, we have this gift that we can impact people, our energy. And I kind of explained it to a kid in terms of like, if you are feeling negative and frustrated and you're kind of like sending that out to everybody else, just think then all of a sudden now they feel that way. I was like, or we have this profound ability to, if we're more positive and kind and aware of ourselves and we're sending out kindness to other people, now like they're going to catch that and now they're going to feel more positive and kind, and try and explain it. And I think sometimes as adults, we even need to understand it in that simple of terms. So hopefully it resonated with him, but I think about that.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think of the pandemic, right? It actually operates that way. So COVID just kept passing on to everybody, and emotions actually have that same effect, and they are that contagious. We don't ever think of it that way, but they truly are. I mean, think of the last time that maybe someone cut you off, and maybe they cut you off, but then they took a second and they put their hand up and waved and was like, "Ooh, sorry," and everything then just became like, okay, but then there's the guy that cuts you off and then actually maybe gives you the finger after that. And imagine what happens after. It's like two same things just exactly happened to you, but then the energy of how it rippled out gets to be different.
That is such a great and so true. I felt it in my body as you talked about both examples.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Corey, one of the last questions I always like to ask people is, so the name of the podcast is It Starts With You. What does It Starts With You mean to you?
Oh my goodness. I'm just thinking my mic drop moment. It was perfect. I wasn't even thinking of that, by the way. What does It Starts With You mean to me? I mean, I think kind of following on that, what I would want to shake somebody to let them know is that we have the power always to change where we're going, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, our own personal experiences, always. So everything really does start with you, and it starts with you taking that radical responsibility, and it might just be taking that deep breath to change it all.
Ooh, there we go. See, that final just like, oof, it's like power. Okay, so I know that people are going to want to find you and follow up with you after listening. So let us know, what do you have going on and how can people find and connect with you?
Well, you can find me on all of the socials. So if you like LinkedIn, you can just put my name, Corene Phelps, over there. Come say hi. Let me know that you listened to this podcast, because I love knowing where you found me from. And of course, I mean, I love to know, because any friend of Julie's is a friend of mine. Instagram, Facebook. Of course, my website is also my name. Basically, just put my name in somewhere and you can find me. Come say hello. And if you come say hello, I'm happy to share I have breathwork audios that I can share with you if you want to toe dip that way. I'm always running master classes, and I actually have a membership that's getting ready to open up here soon, which is really probably one of the most accessible ways for you to be able to experience this work. And then, of course, if you heard and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about that, I want to have this conversation in my place of work, in my corporate, in the corporate setting, know that Julie and I have been working hard to craft a really amazing experience for you to bring into your workplace. So I'd love to have that conversation too.
Oh my goodness. Yes, we will make sure in the show notes too, we drop all of the links to find Corene, and, definitely check out all of the things that she mentioned, whether it's you're like, hey, I just want to learn about this, I want to find her. The membership sounds amazing. So give us just like a quick sneak peek of what's going to be in this membership.
So it's going to be a growing, evolving library of audios that you can access, both breathwork. Sometimes maybe we don't want to go through the whole breathwork experience. Maybe you want to just have something you can listen to. So there will be hypnosis that you can listen to. Maybe you want to pop one in to go to sleep. So those will be in there. And then access to a monthly live workshop, which will be a community experience of hypnobreathwork. And then access to a private community where you can connect with other like-minded individuals who are on a journey to stepping into bigger things, higher performance, and doing so in a way with less stress.
Amazing. And then the last thing, like you mentioned, Corey is creating this amazing experience. And it's been such an honor to get to like walk with you on the journey and work with you on this and getting this out there to people. And so if this sounds like a topic that you are interested in, you're like, wow, how could I bring this to my next event, to my conference, to my team? Definitely reach out, because this is going, not only in her talk is she going to share the why this is so important, and dive way more even into what we can do in this amount of time. But there might be an experience as part of it as well for you to get a taste of what this is actually like and the impact that this can have on your team, on your organization, on your event. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your wisdom. Make sure that you check out Corene Phelps, check out the show notes to connect with her. And thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. Such a fun conversation. I appreciate you.
Amazing. All right. Until next time.